And now, B.F. Skinner's operant conditioning. Like most psychologists, Skinner believes that behavior is lawful. He feels science should work to discover the lawful relationship between events. Science should do more than just observe and describe behavior and explain why it occurred. It should attempt to predict behavior. This is where most other psychologists depart. Most psychologists take satisfaction in explaining how a particular behavior developed, but that's as far as they go. To Skinner, the assumption that behavior is lawful implies that behavior can be predicted and controlled, and this is exactly what he attempts to do. Skinner focuses on observable behavior. He does not investigate thinking, feeling, dreaming, or emotions. Skinner is concerned only with behavior, how it is learned, modifying it, and changing it. He focuses on behaviors which can be influenced by environmental factors, rather than those largely governed by heredity. In an attempt to understand behavior, Skinner has performed countless experiments utilizing laboratory animals such as rats and pigeons. And it was out of these experiments that Skinner formulated the principles of operant conditioning. In an experimental setting, the researcher attempts to identify changes in behavior which occur as a direct result of environmental changes. The researcher attempts to keep the environmental conditions constant and to alter or manipulate only one variable at a time. An independent variable is the one which is manipulated by the experimenter, and the dependent variable is the one which may be altered as a direct result of the changes in the independent variable. For example, each of 3 rats may run a maze in a time of 2 minutes consistently. The researcher may then deprive rat 1 of food for 10 hours before the next run. Rat 2 may be deprived of food for 6 hours before his next run, and rat 3 may be deprived of food for 2 hours before his next run. The independent variable is the number of hours of food deprivation, and the dependent variable is the time it takes to run the maze. The researchers would conclude that any significant changes in the rats' running times occurred as a direct result of changes in the number of hours of food deprivation. Before presenting the principles of operant conditioning, let's review the type of conditioning made famous by the Russian scientist Pavlov, classical conditioning. An unconditioned stimulus is one which will automatically elicit some behavior from the organism. For example, food will elicit salivation. A bright light will elicit closing of the pupils. A neutral stimulus is one which does not elicit a behavioral response from the organism. For example, the sound of a door closing, the sight of a tree, a tap on the shoulder. None of these events elicits a specific behavioral reaction on the part of the person. However, when a neutral stimulus and an unconditioned stimulus are presented simultaneously over a period of time, and then only the neutral stimulus is presented, it may elicit the same response which was elicited by the unconditioned stimulus. When it does, it is then called a conditioned stimulus. For example, the sound of a bell cannot make the pupils of the eyes close, but a bright light can. When the person hears the bell sound each time the light is shined in his eye, and this is done continuously for several hours, it will be observed that the pupils close when only the bell is sounded. This is called classical conditioning. Learning is said to occur when a previously neutral stimulus becomes a conditioned stimulus and has the same eliciting power as the unconditioned stimulus. Skinner distinguishes between two types of behavior. He calls respondent behavior the type which can be elicited from the organism in response to a stimulus. For example, the closing of the pupils in response to light, salivating in response to food, jerking the knee in response to a blow on the knee tendon. A bright light, which Pavlov would call an unconditioned stimulus, can elicit closing of the pupils of the eyes, which Skinner would call a respondent behavior. The second type of behavior, which Skinner feels is of much greater importance, is operant behavior. This is a behavior which is emitted randomly by the organism. The verbalizations of a baby, the handling of objects in the baby's environment, the tendency of an animal to eliminate wherever it happens to be when the need arises. According to Skinner, the great majority of our behavior is operant and not respondent. The principle of reinforcement states that when something in the environment is manipulated, following an operant behavior, thereby increasing the probability of its reoccurrence at some time in the future, the behavior has been reinforced. It is important to note the reinforcer does not elicit the behavior like an unconditioned or conditioned stimulus does. It simply increases the probability of its reoccurrence. A stimulus occurs before and elicits the behavior. A reinforcer occurs after the behavior has occurred and increases the probability that the behavior will occur again. A reinforcer is defined by its effect. Anything can be a reinforcer as long as it increases the probability of the behavior occurring again at some time in the future. However, what is reinforcing to one person may not be reinforcing to another. One worker may increase output for a bonus in pay, while another works harder when given recognition. To one child, a cookie may be a reinforcer, while another may perform more as desired when praised or complimented. To determine if something is indeed a reinforcer of behavior, the behavior should be observed to increase in frequency of occurrence when followed by the reinforcer, gradually decrease as the reinforcer is withdrawn, and then increase again when the reinforcer is returned. In positive reinforcement, something is added to the situation which increases the probability of that behavior occurring again. A child may be given attention, a piece of candy. A person may be praised or complimented, or perhaps given a pay raise. An animal may be petted. Negative reinforcement is a much misunderstood term. Many people believe that negative reinforcement and punishment are the same. They are not. In negative reinforcement, something is taken away, which increases the probability of a behavior occurring again. Usually it is something uncomfortable which is removed. For example, a rat may learn to press a certain lever which results in the turning off of a bright light. A person may learn to close a window or door which will eliminate an annoying draft, an imposing noise, the rain, or the heat from the sun. In positive punishment, something is added to the situation which reduces the probability of the behavior occurring again. For example, reprimanding or spanking a child, writing up an employee, or yanking on a dog's chain. In negative punishment, something is taken away which reduces the probability of the behavior occurring again. For example, taking away television privileges or allowance from a child, taking away an important responsibility from a worker, or making an athlete pay a fine. In extinction, the probability of a behavior occurring again is reduced, and the behavior is eventually eliminated by simply removing whatever has been reinforcing it. A child's temper tantrums may be being reinforced by the parent's tendency to give in and let the child have his way. Holding steadfastly to one's decision and not being swayed by the child's tantrums would remove the reinforcer and lead to extinction of the tantruming behavior. Feeding a dog scraps periodically from the table will certainly keep it coming back for more, until the scraps are withheld completely, for a long period of time very probably. Only then will the behavior extinguish. Skinner has found that the most effective times to reinforce or punish a behavior are while it is occurring or immediately after it occurs. The longer one waits, the less effective the reinforcer or punishment tends to be. In reinforcing a child's quiet play behavior, it is more effective to reward the behavior while it is occurring, rather than waiting until after dinner, for example. Similarly, it is more effective for one parent to punish the child immediately if observed doing something wrong or dangerous, rather than waiting until both parents are available. Most companies offer annual pay raises for a job well done over the course of the year. But because of the long time delay, it is questionable whether this is an effective reinforcer. Many companies recognize the need for more immediate reinforcement. They organize weekly performance contests and give out prizes. There are awards and bonus incentives given on a monthly basis, as well as ongoing expressions of appreciation and praise from supervisors. When the desired behavior is being emitted, reinforcers can be administered with two types of schedules: a frequency of response schedule or a time schedule. A ratio reinforcement schedule depends on the number of desired behaviors emitted by the person or animal. A continuous reinforcement schedule is when the reinforcement is given immediately following the occurrence of the desired behavior, each and every time it occurs. This is the most effective reinforcement schedule to use when a new behavior is being learned. A fixed ratio reinforcement schedule is when reinforcement is given immediately following the third occurrence of the behavior, the 7th time the desired behavior is emitted, the 20th time, the 40th time, or any other number. A variable ratio reinforcement schedule is when the reinforcement is given after the desired behavior occurs, but on a variable or random basis. It could be after the 9th occurrence, then after the 17th, the 12th, the 4th, or any other number. The variable ratio reinforcement schedule is also called an intermittent reinforcement schedule. This is the reinforcement schedule used by gambling casinos. Once a new behavior is learned, this is the most effective reinforcement schedule to use so that the behavior will last a long time, and gambling casinos have proved this out quite effectively. An interval reinforcement schedule is when the reinforcement follows the desired behavior but is administered at different time intervals. A fixed interval reinforcement schedule is when the time period is fixed and the reinforcement is given every 10 minutes, every 30 minutes, every 4 minutes, or any other time interval. One example in everyday life of a fixed interval reinforcement schedule comes every Friday in the form of a paycheck. A variable interval reinforcement schedule is when the time period is not fixed, but rather varies. The reinforcement may come after 9 minutes, 11 minutes, 15 minutes, 22 seconds, or any other time period. Skinner distinguishes between primary and secondary reinforcers. Food, water, sex, and warmth are primary reinforcers because they have survival value to the organism. When primary reinforcers are administered after the occurrence of a desired behavior, it is likely that the behavior will increase in frequency of occurrence, especially if the organism has been deprived for a period of time. Primary reinforcers are also called unconditioned reinforcers. A secondary reinforcer is something which has no survival value to the organism, but if administered after the occurrence of a behavior, will increase the likelihood of the behavior occurring again. Money is perhaps the best example of a secondary or conditioned reinforcer. In the same manner that a neutral stimulus can become a conditioned stimulus and elicit a behavioral response, an inanimate object such as money can reinforce behavior simply by being paired with a primary reinforcer. When an organism's behavior is reinforced in a specific situation, that behavior will be observed to occur in other similar situations. This has been called stimulus generalization. For example, on the wall of a pigeon's cage have been drawn 3 colored circles: red, blue, and yellow. If the pigeon is given a pellet of food each time it pecks only at the red circle, this behavior will be observed to occur more often. If the colors are then changed to orange, gray, and brown, the pigeon will be observed to peck at the orange circle. When the substitute is very similar to the original, the frequency of response is almost identical. As the substitute differs more and more, the frequency of response drops off accordingly. If a child is reinforced for cleaning his room, this cleaning behavior will in all probability generalize to school settings, the homes of his playmates, and to work environments. To Skinner, a personality is no more than a collection of patterns of behavior. By examining a person's environment, we can discover the reinforcers of behavior which will help us to explain how the person's behaviors developed, help us predict what the person's behaviors will be, and help us change the person's behavior. Skinner does not acknowledge the existence of internal mechanisms which determine personality or behavior. For example, the id, the ego, the superego, the self, archetypes, the unconscious mind, feelings, emotions, or motivation. According to Skinner, a person may not always display the same behavior to the same degree, but there is no need to assume that some invisible force exists which accounts for these variations. Emotions do not cause people to yell and scream, whine, pout, cry, or throw tantrums. The reaction people met with when they did yell and scream, whine, pout, cry, throw a tantrum, and so forth is what resulted in their present-day behavior patterns. Some adults cry easily, others never shed a tear. Some yell and carry on at the top of their lungs, while others are reserved and softly spoken. Some are assertive and straightforward, others are shy, indirect, or manipulative. Some are bold and risk-taking, while others are cautious and timid. What a person does is a direct result of the reinforcers and punishments received in response to previous behaviors. Skinner believes abnormal behavior develops in the same way normal behavior develops, as a consequence of reinforcing agents present in the environment. The popular layman's term, negative attention, refers to those times we inadvertently reinforce undesirable behaviors. Letting a child get his way when he whines or throws a tantrum. Letting a child get out of doing a chore because he all of a sudden doesn't feel well. Or giving a child attention when his behavior is disruptive, for example, while the parent is on the telephone or while the teacher is speaking. One of the contributors to what we might call neurotic behavior is the inconsistency with which reinforcers and punishments are doled out. A child who throws a tantrum may sometimes get his way, and other times he may be punished severely. Rather than saying that this type of treatment leads to confusion and the development of neurosis, Skinner would say that it leads to the development of irregular patterns of behavior. The goal of therapy is simply to alter or replace undesirable behavior with behavior which is more desirable. This is accomplished by beginning with a functional analysis. A functional analysis is an investigation to determine what is currently reinforcing the undesirable behavior. The investigator would observe the behavior, describe the behavior, record how often the behavior occurs, record when it occurs, record what happens after the behavior occurs, and attempt to determine what is reinforcing this undesirable behavior. These reinforcers are then removed and only administered when desirable behavior is observed. A hospital patient may ring for the nurse 15 times per day when there is no emergency and all that is desired is a little personal attention. Experienced nurses are quick to learn who the problem patients are and begin to ignore the ringing behavior so that it will extinguish. The next step, which is vitally important, is to wait for times when the patient is displaying quiet behavior or cooperative behavior, and to administer the reinforcing personal attention at that time. Skinner's operant reinforcement principles have been used to develop token economies which have been effective in a wide variety of hospital and rehabilitation settings. Here, patients are given tokens when they perform some desired behavior, perhaps grooming themselves, cleaning their rooms, reading a magazine, or participating in social activities. Later, they can exchange these tokens like money at the hospital store and purchase cigarettes, candy, books, and so forth. Skinner places great emphasis on describing behavior in observable, measurable terms. He would not say, "The rats are hungry." He would say, "They are 7 hours food deprived." He would not say, "The animal is getting too tired to respond because the medication is making him feel drowsy." He would say, "The animal's response rate has dropped from 8 times per minute to 4 times per minute, 15 minutes after the administration of 5 milligrams of the drug." He would not say, "The child is disobedient." He would say, "The child was observed to call out answers 4 times within the period of 1 hour without raising his hand." To review Side 2, just stop the tape now and turn it over. Thank you.